Hi, hello. Welcome back to the Dion's POV podcast. My name is Dion, and I'm so glad to have you guys here with me today. So, let's get into today's episode. So, life honestly has been a little hectic lately. Like, I'm trying to apply to school still. Like, I'm still getting secondaries right now. I'm waiting for responses. I had an interview. And on top of that, I'm trying to like carry my weight with my hijab business. Um, which is called Ria, by the way. Just putting that out there. But yeah, just like juggling those two plus my own life. Um, and also just like making time for the hobbies that kind of matter. Because right now I'm really into photography. I really enjoy it, and I've been like learning a lot more about it too through like Skillshare and stuff, which honestly has been helpful. Like I was kind of iffy about signing up for Skillshare, but like when I did, like I feel like it's like you have all these new resources that you can use, and it's been great, honestly. And on top of that, um, I adopted a kitten a week ago, a little bit over a week ago, and it's crazy because like third day in, he got sick, and now I'm like trying to take care of him, trying to see like what's bothering him because he has like an upset stomach, and I've been taking him to the vet and just like taking notes. So I have a lot on my plate. And honestly, being an adult in general is a lot of work. It's hard, it's a lot of responsibility, and it's tough out here sometimes. I feel like a lot of the times though, like like a little bit harder in general is the fact that we have to make so many decisions for ourselves. Because like when you're growing up, a lot of your harder decisions are like made for you. And when I was younger, like I didn't even have to worry about what outfit I was gonna wear because I went to a private school. I knew what I was gonna wear the next day, so it didn't even matter. So a lot of the times I was just like cruising through life. Like it was kind of like the story was practically written and I was just going along with the dialogue, you know what I mean? And now I'm like the writer of my own story, which is honestly crazy. And honestly, like, even before you go into like the whole adulting thing, I feel like society also kind of gave you a rule book. Like, it's like you're gonna do this, this, that. You're gonna go to college, you're gonna get a job, you're gonna climb the corporate ladder. Um, like the standard thing that society would want every person to do. And I guess like the funny part is we have like the authority to decide for ourselves. So it's like you can decide to follow society's rule, you can decide to not follow some, you have the right to your own life. So it's just like making the decisions, right? So now you're calling the shots for your career, the friendships that you want to have, your relationships, and even like the kind of life that you want to live. Like it's all in your hands. Like you're the executive decision maker. And honestly, it gets so overwhelming because it's like when you're younger, all you have to really worry about is like little things, like your friends, um, and just like hanging out. Like you don't have really big responsibilities that you have to handle. And for me, these past 2 years have been kind of like a whirlwind of decision after decision, right? Because I was in school last year, and not only did I have to pick my classes, but then I also had other responsibilities that I put on my plate, just like I was a mentor, and I decided to be a mentor, right? I really enjoyed working with people and helping them like reach their goals. I switched from research in agriculture to research in OB/GYN because I thought it was more interesting. And it was just like picking my friends, Because I feel like when you're in like high school and stuff, your friends are like mandatory, you know what I mean? Like you're kind of forced to become friends because you guys are all in the same circle. But like finding friends that I enjoy being around or leaving some friendships, um, just like choosing the way that I want to portray myself, even the identity that you have is something that you're deciding to have. You know what I mean? It's all about decisions because we're just like this vessel that has the will to choose what they want to be. And it's like even the person that you are, the way you carry yourself, the way you talk, um, literally everything is something that you have decided on your own. And I feel like I made a lot of like big decisions when it came to my career because I trusted my gut. Um, when I worked as a clinical scribe, I decided to leave it after like a year and a half in because I felt like it wasn't for me anymore. I felt like it was a little redundant at some point. I felt like I wasn't learning as much as I did in the beginning, which is, it happens. Like, I was like, okay, this season has ended. What do I want to do next? I chose to go into research next because I worked like part time as a research assistant. So I was like, I want to like pursue this a little bit more. I did that and I learned so much. And when I got back from my trip this summer, I felt like the same feeling. Like I was like, I feel like this isn't for me anymore. So I decided to just leave the job. And I know like when it comes to career choices, it's not as easy as like to like leave just like that. You know what I mean? But I did have the luxury to do that and I really do appreciate it. And it's just not like career wise, it also has to do with our social lives as well. Like when it comes to friendships, like I choose the type of friendships that I want to have. I choose the people that I want to be around with. And a lot of the times, like I tend to like break off relationships or like it kind of like doles out on its own because it's just not a relationship for me. It's not something that I want to be in. So I just kind of distanced myself. And it's not like the person's a bad person or they're this or that. It just meant that it wasn't a right fit. And that's totally fine. And as people always say, like some relationships have seasons and sometimes the season comes to an end. When it comes to decision making and making my own decisions, I often tie it with finding my own voice. Because when I was younger, I was a very quiet and shy person. And when I tell people now that I was like a shy, awkward person, they're like, you know, that doesn't make any sense. But I genuinely was. And it's funny because a lot of the time it was just like, what if I make a mistake? And I was just really fearful of making those mistakes in social settings, which is why I kind of like became more reserved and I just like kept my ideas and everything to myself. Like I didn't necessarily speak up, right? And I feel like the only way I've even like figured that out for myself was I journaled a lot. Like 2021 was like a year where I journaled extensively. Like I would journal like 1 to 2 times a day. And I really like realized I was like, I'm so scared of like making these decisions for my career. I'm scared of making these decisions for my social life. I'm scared of saying the wrong thing when it comes to certain relationships. You know what I mean? So it was just like being more reserved in that sense. So when I acknowledged it, I started taking baby steps, right? Like I started making decisions for myself. I was like, I'm gonna do this. And I like stuck with it. Even if it felt super uncomfortable, I just headbutted it, you know what I mean? So I was just like, I'm gonna stick with this decision because it's something that I want to do, even though it's uncomfortable. I just have to go through with it. And the more I did that, the more I became comfortable with it. The more I was like, okay, like your decision was the right decision for you. Even if it looks like the wrong decision for everybody else, it was the right decision for you and you trusted your gut. And the more you like trust yourself, the more comfortable you feel making the hard decisions and avoiding decision fatigue. Because I feel like when you're in your early 20s and you have all these new decisions that you have to make, you end up falling into decision fatigue and you kind of get exhausted and it could lead to anxiety, depression, all of those. And it's just because you have all these overwhelming, um, life altering decisions that you have to make. And you can't avoid it forever. You know what I mean? You eventually have to like make that decision. Um, but there's just so many ways that you can avoid decision fatigue. So, when we are experiencing decision fatigue, right, it's due to like all these choices that you have to make, which can lead to like mental drainage, right? You know, when you're kind of just like mentally drained and you don't want to do anything, that is what happens when we have so many decisions to make and we're unable to like make up our mind. So, this all happens in our prefrontal cortex, where it basically it helps you come up with like emotional regulation, decision making, self-control, all of those stuff, right? That's where it all happens. So when you're overworking it, right, your ability to make effective decisions takes a hit, and now you're mentally drained and you have decision fatigue. And what a lot of people don't realize is that it mainly has to do with self-trust. So when you don't trust yourself enough, you spend more time overthinking and second guessing yourself, right? And every choice that you make, so you're constantly in your head, you're thinking about A, B, and C, and like, what if you do B and it doesn't work out? Or what if this happens? You see, you're like constantly in your head, so you're overworking the system. And then now you're mentally drained, like now you're exhausted. And all that self doubt will literally just drain your energy. So think of it like this: energy nor is created or destroyed. When we talk about like our mental energy or physical energy, all that, it's actual energy that we're repurposing to overthink. So the more energy you put into overthinking, that less energy you have to do other things. Okay, so trusting yourself is key. It makes life easier, it makes everything more simple, and it just allows you to focus more on what matters to you. And it will just like jump over all the overthinking. Like the less you overthink, the easier it becomes. And it also boosts your confidence, and it keeps like making choices a lot easier to make. So it's like you're practicing confidence here. You're practicing being able to make those decisions, and later like the harder decisions, it's a lot easier for you to make. So it's not about getting it perfect, it's just knowing that you got it, like you got it, you know what I mean? And honestly, it just like reduces that mental load, and it also reduces decision fatigue, just because when you start to believe in your ability to make the right call, even if it's not perfect, the less energy you are putting into it. So, the reason why decision making is so hard, it's so tough, is because it makes you take responsibility. Even for the smallest things, you are responsible for the decisions that you make. It's not the guy next to you, it's not your mom's fault, it's nobody else's fault but you. Like, you have to be able to take responsibility, even if it doesn't go the way you anticipated. Okay, so for most situations, we tend to be very accommodating or polite or da 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 because society said so. And I'm not saying you have to be a rude person, right? Like, you don't have to be rude. You can still be a genuine, good, nice person. However, don't put yourself on the back burner. Don't put your beliefs on the back burner to accommodate somebody else. Like, if you disagree, that's totally fine. Like, you can say, hey, I disagree, and you guys can just leave it at that. But when you're constantly like bending backwards and being accommodating and polite and just agreeing because um you don't want to be rude, then you're putting yourself on the back burner. You're second guessing yourself. You're abandoning your gut feeling just because somebody else doesn't agree with you. And the thing is, when it comes to like self-trust, it's also a relationship. It's like any other relationship that you have, right? Like, you trust your parents, you trust your sister, you trust your friends. Um, but then, do you trust yourself? Did you put in the time and energy in order to trust yourself? So, just like anything else, practice makes perfect. So just take that small step. All right, everything starts with baby steps. Make a decision with low stakes. Like what are you going to wear today? What are you going to eat today? Like I feel like I even have a hard time like figuring out what I want to eat. But just like making that decision and committing to it. And since it's such a low stakes situation, you can trust yourself, or you can try and trust yourself, because it's not the end of the world. And try not to overthink. Don't think about it too much. Make the decision and go with that first decision that you had. And you have to trust your instincts, right? You have to own that decision that you just made, because at the end of the day, no decision is ever going to be perfect, but it is indeed your decision. So you just stand by it. So another major thing that you can do decision fatigue is by simplifying your options. Decide what truly like is important to you. I like when I started doing the whole journey of self-trust or whatever, I decided to do like a pros and con list. Like I like to write it out, like pro this, con this, you know what I mean? Then I'll make my decision. And just like being able to set boundaries for yourself, and just like avoid over accommodating others, you know what I mean? Just like when you make your decision and you know you don't want to do something, don't do it, because you literally have the right to say no. And when you start setting those boundaries for yourself, it's super important to like know what you want. Does this align with you? It's a yes or no question, and when you decide, stick by it. Stick by it through the end. And also take the time to reflect on these situations, right? See what worked and see what didn't work for you. And don't forget to speak up in your everyday life. Like, even if it's something small, just say what you're thinking. Say what is right to you, you know what I mean? Even if it's like something small, it's like correcting somebody about how you say your name. So I like to think that our brains are extremely complex, but also extremely simple, right? Because a lot of the times we're running off a reward system. And when we confidently like make a decision, dopamine is released, right? We get that reward. And it also reinforces the fact that you trust yourself. But the more you second guess, you kind of just skip over that dopamine loop and you don't get that reward. And you rely on others to validate your choice, so you miss out on that reward loop because you didn't do it yourself, right? So our brains will adapt the more we do it. The more you're confident in making your decisions, the more dopamine you get and the more reward that you get, because it's like, sheesh, like you really did that, you know what I mean? But when we start to doubt ourselves and just like overthink, we kind of reinforce that fear of, what if I make the wrong decision? So, anywho, when I have like a big decision to make, whether it's in my career, relationships, whatever, I tend to take some time. I have designated time to think about it, and I have to make my decision at the end of that thinking session, right? And it's not pretty long, right? I take like a couple minutes by myself and I clear my mind. I like to start with a clean slate, because if I have other things on my mind, it's kind of hard to make a decision on this one thing when I'm thinking about so many other things. So I kind of quiet my mind, breathe, and I think about the dilemma that I have. Then I make a decision, right? So when I make that decision, I tend to stick by it, because I'm like, I learned to trust myself. And when I learn to trust myself, it's a lot easier to make those harder decisions. So, and sometimes when you're making a decision, external advice is somewhat necessary. And like the difference between finding that external validation and making the decision on your own is something that I will get into in a little bit. But I have a handful of people I absolutely trust with my life. And my mother is at the top of that list. Like, if I ever have a problem and I can't seem to figure out what to do, I will go to her, get some advice, take that advice, reevaluate everything, right? Then make my decision. Because there's a difference from like taking other people's word as final statement and just going with what they said rather than just taking their words into account, right? So I'm trying to think of a good example, but when my mother gives me advice, I take her advice, right? Because I value it and I put it on the table with all my other solutions. Then I take a snippet of what my mother said, what I was thinking, and then I eventually come up with a solution that works for me. And that is my decision to make. You know what I mean? Rather than just letting my mom, like my mother, decide every little thing that happens in my life. You know what I mean? And it's just like having that balance is key. And when you trust yourself and you stand by yourself, you're able to build that confidence, and it will also help you shape the future that you want. So you need to be able to trust yourself. You need to rewire your brain in order to like trust your instincts rather than doubt yourself. And that will really just help you skyrocket and live the life that you want to live. So I just wanted to give you guys a little reminder that building that self-trust and confidence and all of that, it takes time. It's not as easy as flipping to the next page. You need to put in that energy, that effort in order to build that relationship with yourself. And when you do, it will honestly change your life for the better. It changed my life for the better. And now I feel like I'm a lot more confident in just like all aspects of my life. And I'm able to make the hard decisions, even if other people are going to be unhappy with me. That is totally fine. So take the time to find your own voice. Take the time to stand on what you believe. Take the time to learn more about yourself and trust yourself and love yourself. Show yourself some self-compassion there. And I feel like it's just so important, especially in today's day and age, to understand and know your own voice, especially with so much like external influences such as social media, societal expectations, and this idea of constantly comparing ourselves. It's kind of easy to lose sight of what truly matters to you. So finding and trusting your voice is key to navigating life with a lot of confidence and being your authentic self. So as always, I wanted to leave you guys with a small poem from one of my, I would say, one of my few poetry books. It's called Inward by Young Pueblo. I'm gonna leave it in the descriptions. I feel like I butcher his name every time I reference him. Anywho, he says, make sure the walls you build to protect yourself do not become a prison. Anywho, let's just take a moment to let that sink in. Okay, so if you guys have any book recommendations, it can be poetry, it can be literally anything. I feel like I need a new book and I need a good book. So if you guys have any recommendations, please leave them in the comments. Okay, anywho, thank you guys so much for joining me again. If you like this episode, don't forget to leave a comment and a review. And if you guys like this podcast, please share it with friends or family or anybody that you think will like it. If you guys want to keep up, connect, whatever, I am on Instagram at AnsBB. So yeah, thank you guys again for joining, keeping up. I truly do appreciate it. And I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye.